Okay, so, when you think about extinct animals, like gone forever, you know, I always think about the dodo.
Right.
That bird, the dodo bird that couldn't fly from Mauritius, last seen,
Yeah.
like in 1681.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's crazy how they just didn't care about humans. Like, they had no fear.
Right.
They just walk right up to those Dutch sailors back in the 1600s,
Yeah.
and they'd, like, offer their nests. I even read some accounts where they were offering their nests to the sailors
Oh, wow.
because they never knew predators.
Right.
So they didn't have any reason to be afraid of us. And, sadly, that just led to them disappearing so quickly.
Yeah.
Like hunting, deforestation, new animals just wiped them out in decades.
It's amazing how fast things can change, isn't it?
It really is,
And I think it makes you think about, the impact we're having on the planet right now. And
Yeah.
for a long time, extinction, felt like a one-way street.
Right.
But now you hear about all these efforts to kind of reverse that.
Right, exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. This crazy world of de-extinction, like, can we really bring back these animals that are gone? Like the dodo you mentioned, the woolly mammoth, the thylacine, these animals that have been gone for, centuries, some of them millennia even.
Yeah.
And there's this company, Colossal Biosciences, down in Texas.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, and they're super ambitious.
Yeah.
They want to make extinction a thing of the past.
Wow.
Like, gone completely. They're even saying they're going to bring back the dodo by 2028.
Seriously?
Yeah, it sounds insane. It sounds like sci-fi.
It really does. But what's really cool is that they're not just, talking about this.
Right.
They've got some of the best scientists in the world working for them.
Right.
Using the latest genetic engineering techniques.
Yeah, and we're looking at this interview in the week
Okay.
with Beth Shapiro. She's an evolutionary biologist and the chief science officer at Colossal.
Oh, wow.
She's really, laying out how they're going to do this, what the science is behind it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and this is such a relevant topic right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We're in this biodiversity crisis. I don't know if you saw that UN report.
Yeah, I think I did.
That said, that species are declining faster and faster.
Right.
And the World Animal Foundation is saying we could lose up to half of all species by 2050.
That's scary.
It's a huge problem. And Colossal has a ton of money to tackle it.
Really? How much?
Like $200 million in funding.
Wow.
It's a big deal. And what I think is smart is that they're focusing on different types of animals.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
So they're working with a bird, the dodo, a mammal, the woolly mammoth, and a marsupial, the thylacine.
Oh, wow.
So it's like they're building all these different tools for de-extinction,
Yeah, that's a good point, because by doing that, they're not just focused on those specific animals, right?
Yeah.
They're developing these techniques that they could use for a whole bunch of different animals.
Exactly.
That are, threatened by extinction today. And it's like they're expanding the options for conservation.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's get into it. Like, why are they doing this? What's the big deal about de-extinction?
Well, the urgency, comes from this biodiversity crisis.
Right.
We talk about losing animals and plants, but it's more than that, right?
Right.
It's about whole ecosystems collapsing, and those are the systems that we depend on.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the reports from the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, I think so.
But they're saying that a big chunk of our global GDP
Really?
is tied to these natural processes.
Wow.
So if we lose biodiversity,
Yeah.
it's going to have huge economic consequences for everybody.
Right. It's all connected in ways that we're just starting to understand.
Yeah.
And, Shapiro, she talks about this idea of keystone species.
Right.
I don't know if everyone knows what that means.
Yeah, good point. So basically think about like an archway.
Okay.
The keystone is that wedge-shaped stone at the top that holds the whole thing together.
Okay.
So a keystone species is kind of like that. It has this really important role in keeping the ecosystem stable and diverse.
So it's not just about their numbers.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Their impact is way bigger than you'd expect based on how many there are.
Okay.
And Shapiro says when you lose a keystone species,
Yeah.
it's like pulling that keystone out of the arch.
Right.
The whole thing can start to fall apart. You can get more extinctions, and the whole ecosystem becomes unstable.
So it's not about bringing back a dodo just to put it in a zoo.
No, not at all.
It's about restoring the whole system.
Exactly. It's about getting those ecological interactions back.
Yeah.
And using that to try to save biodiversity.
Okay, so that's the why, right?
Yeah.
Now, the big question is, how do you bring back an animal that's been gone for hundreds of years?
Right. Well, it all starts with DNA.
Okay.
They have to get genetic material from the extinct species.
And where do they find that?
Well, for the woolly mammoth, they've been able to get DNA from these frozen remains
Oh, wow.
that they found in the Arctic permafrost.
So it's like perfectly preserved.
Yeah. Well, pretty close. It's amazing what they can find in that permafrost.
But DNA, that old, it can't be in good shape, right?
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Shapiro says it breaks down over time. Microbes get in there and chop it up.
Oh, wow.
And the DNA itself starts to fragment into tiny pieces.
So how do they even work with that?
This is where it gets really cool. They're using AI and computers
Okay.
to put those pieces back together.
Really?
It's like having this ancient vase that's shattered into a million pieces.
Yeah.
And they're using these advanced algorithms to figure out how it all fits back together.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's a huge challenge, but they're making progress.
Okay, so let's say they got this ancient DNA all pieced together. What do they do with it?
So the next step is to find its closest living relative.
Okay.
For the mammoth, that's the Asian elephant.
Really?
Yeah, they share something like 98% of their DNA.
That's so close.
I know, it's crazy, right? And what Shapiro's saying is if you have an Asian elephant cell in a lab,
Yeah.
you're already most of the way to having a mammoth.
Okay, so that 2%, that's different. That's what makes the mammoth a mammoth.
Right, exactly. And that's where they use these gene editing tools like CRISPR.
CRISPR, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's like this molecular scalpel
Oh, wow.
that can go in and make really precise changes to the DNA.
Okay.
So they compare the mammoth genome, the whole thing,
Yeah.
to the Asian elephant genome.
Right.
And they look for the differences, the genes that are consistently different in the mammoth samples.
Okay.
And those are the genes that give the mammoth its unique traits.
Like the thick fur and the blubber.
Exactly. So once they've found those genes, they use CRISPR
Yeah.
to edit the DNA in Asian elephant cells to match the mammoth version.
So they're not like creating a mammoth from scratch.
No, not
It's more like modifying the elephant to be more mammoth-like.
Right. They're kind of upgrading the elephant's genetic software.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, and then once they have those modified cells,
Yeah.
they use this technique called somatic cell nuclear transfer.
What is that?
It's basically cloning. They take the nucleus from that lab-grown mammoth-like cell,
Right?
and they put it into an Asian elephant egg that's had its own nucleus removed.
Oh, wow.
And then that egg, if everything goes right, it'll start dividing and growing into an embryo.
And then they put that embryo into a surrogate.
Exactly. A female Asian elephant would carry the pregnancy.
Wow. And the baby would be like a mammoth?
They're calling it a mammothized Asian elephant.
Okay.
It would have those key mammoth traits, the fur, the blubber.
And when do they think this will happen?
Shapiro said they're aiming for embryos by late 2026.
Wow, that's soon.
And maybe even baby mammoths by 2028.
It's crazy how fast this is all moving.
I know, it's exciting.
Yeah, and they even did that experiment with the mice, right?
Oh, yeah, the woolly mice?
Yeah.
That was cool. They basically took genes from mammoths that are related to fur,
Right.
and they put those genes into mice.
And it worked.
Yeah, they were able to make mice with woollier fur.
That's so cool.
It was proof that they could actually use gene editing to create these traits in a living animal.
That's amazing. Okay, so that's how they're doing the mammoth. What about the dodo? You said it's different for birds.
Yeah, it is. The main issue with birds is their eggs.
What about them?
It's really hard to work with the nucleus in a bird egg.
Right.
In mammals, it's pretty straightforward. You can take out the nucleus and put in a new one.
Right.
But bird eggs, they're much bigger, and the nucleus is harder to get to.
Yeah.
Especially once the egg starts developing, there's no good way to do it without damaging the egg.
So how do they make a dodo then?
So they're working with these things called primordial germ cells.
What are those?
They're the cells that eventually turn into sperm and eggs.
Okay.
So the plan is to take those cells from a Nicobar pigeon embryo.
The Nicobar pigeon, that's like the closest relative to the dodo, right?
Yeah, it's the closest living relative, but actually the solitaire, which is another extinct bird, is even closer genetically.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they were able to figure that out from the DNA.
Okay, so they get these cells from the pigeon embryo, and then what?
They edit those cells in the lab to be more like dodo cells,
Okay.
and then they inject those modified cells into chicken embryos.
Chicken embryos.
Yeah, sterile chickens and roosters.
So the chickens themselves won't be dodos.
Yeah.
But their offspring will be.
Well, the hope is that some of their offspring will inherit those modified reproductive cells.
Okay.
And if two of those birds mate, then they could potentially have a dodo chick.
Wow. It's like a multi-generational process.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than the mammoth.
Right. Okay. And then there's the thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger.
Ah, yes, another one that people really want to see back.
So what are the challenges with that one?
Well, one of the biggest is the size difference.
Size difference.
Yeah, the thylacine was like a wolf-sized marsupial,
Right.
but their proposed surrogate is this tiny marsupial mouse called a dunnart.
Oh, wow.
So trying to grow a wolf-sized animal inside a mouse-sized animal.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Well, it's a huge challenge. They're still trying to figure out how to make that work.
So every animal is different.
Exactly. Each one has its own unique challenges.
And it's not just the DNA and the surrogates, right? There's other stuff too, like how long it takes an elephant to have a baby.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Asian elephants are pregnant for 22 months.
Wow, that's a long time to wait for a mammoth.
And another issue is that elephant sperm and eggs are hard to come by.
Right.
So Colossal is working on these things called induced pluripotent stem cells.
What are those?
They're basically adult cells that they've reprogrammed to be like stem cells again.
Okay.
It's like taking a specialized cell and turning it back into a blank slate.
So it can become any kind of cell.
Yeah, even sperm and eggs, potentially.
That's crazy.
It would mean they wouldn't have to rely on getting reproductive cells from actual elephants.
That's a clever solution.
Okay.
So there's a lot of progress, but you said earlier that some scientists are skeptical.
Yeah, there's definitely some skepticism out there.
Why is that?
Well, Shapiro herself admits that a lot of Colossal's research hasn't been peer-reviewed yet. And that's important in science to make sure the results are solid and can be replicated.
Okay.
And there are also concerns about what would happen if they actually put these animals back into the wild.
Right. It's not just as simple as bringing them back.
No, there could be unintended consequences for the existing ecosystems.
Yeah, and Shapiro talks about how we'd have to change as a society.
Absolutely. She says we'd need to change our attitudes and behaviors.
Right.
And even our laws to make sure there's space for these animals.
Okay, and then there are the ethical questions like bringing back Neanderthals.
Yeah, that one is really complicated.
It is.
Shapiro said that we could probably get like 92% of the Neanderthal genome from modern human DNA.
Wow.
So it makes you think about what extinction really means.
Yeah.
But she said she wouldn't want to bring back Neanderthals because we couldn't get their consent.
That's a good point. We can't just assume they'd want to be brought back.
Exactly. It's a huge ethical dilemma.
Okay, so to wrap it up, we've talked about these incredible advances in de-extinction technology.
Yeah.
With Colossal Biosciences leading the charge, trying to bring back animals like the dodo and the mammoth.
And the potential benefits are huge, right?
Yeah.
For biodiversity, for restoring ecosystems.
But there are also challenges, right?
Oh, for sure.
Scientific challenges,
Yeah.
ethical challenges.
Yeah, there's still a lot to figure out.
Right. So here's a question for you to think about. Given how much we've impacted the planet, do we have a responsibility to try to fix things with de-extinction?
It's a tough question.
It is. And if we do bring these animals back, what will that mean for the future of life on Earth?
It's something we need to think about carefully.
And for those of you who are preparing for the UPSC exams, this is all super relevant to your studies.
Oh, absolutely.
We've covered biotech, genetic engineering, environmental conservation, ethical issues in science.
All key topics for both prelims and mains.
Exactly. So if you liked this deep dive, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel for more, and leave a comment if you have any questions.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
And remember, this was all based on that interview in the week.
Go check it out.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.